Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Showtime Nerds podcast. I am your lovely host, Curly, and I am with Grimmo,
Remo!
TheNovaNuclear,
What's up?
and of course, my good old buddy Ralph, aka Yes. So today, guys, what we're going to talk about is our comic book experiences. So that means a couple of things. So that means maybe it could be our first comic book we ever picked up, our first exposure to a comic book character or movie, whatever we want to start it off with. So yeah, that's probably going to be the only topic we have this week, if anything. Do you guys have anything you want to share at all?
There's one comment that I saw on our social media platform that one person at least wants static. If we could get more likes and views, I'll definitely do a video on static, or we could all do it together.
Bet, yo. That'd be great. Man, what was...
So if you want something on static, put it on the comments, like the video, share it, and we'll definitely get to that.
So let's start it off with Ralph. Ralph, what was your first ever comic book experience?
Probably dressing up as Superman as a child.
Was it like for Halloween?
Literally, yeah, for Halloween, I think like when I was like 1 or 2 years old. Literally, it's just a picture of me wearing a Superman outfit.
Damn.
And I had a bunch of those action figures, like those like Batman and Superman action figures as a kid. Even though I didn't really like, you know the names like Batman and Superman, but like I didn't know the stories as a kid because it was like 2 years old. So I wasn't like really into it until I got to like, I'd say around 8 years old when I watched like Iron Man 3. Like that's really when I got like super into it, and I really understood like what it meant to be part of loving comic books and loving like those types of characters. Because sure, I watched like Teen Titans as a kid too, but I didn't watch it enough to say like, oh, I love this. I love this type of stuff. Like I love comic book characters. But it wasn't until I watched like Iron Man 3 when it came out. I was a terrified kid, so I was like, I never really watched like horror or anything like that. But like Iron Man 3 was like that first movie for me, like that first action movie, I guess you can say too. But like Iron Man 3 was a really great experience for me. Like even though like I saw my brother loving it too, like we were just having such a great time watching the movie. By the end of it, I watched Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and then I watched the Avengers like a week after that. So like it literally just like started and I just never stopped after that.
There you go. I mean, it's crazy though because I remember more, like you said, like the TV shows. I remember more DC TV shows than I did Marvel movies growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
Like the most prevalent one had to be Teen Titans, but I also watched the old Static Shock cartoon. That probably was one of my favorite shows that I never got to see on TV anymore after a while. Dude, yeah. There's a lot of good stuff that happened around the early 2000s.
Yeah, especially like well, Young Justice was like 2010, but like
But still, dude.
yeah, but they were still really good. The
Yeah.
only early the only early shows that came out from Marvel were like the X-Men animated series, the Amazing Spider-Man, like that kind of stuff. But I don't think I watched too many of those as a kid until like I turned into like until I got to like 11, 12 years old.
Yeah.
Like that stuff like coming around middle school, that's when like you saw that stuff on Netflix or you saw that stuff like just anywhere and then you watch clips of that, like you start getting into it like that.
But then you also have probably like the biggest animated show for us growing up. I think it was Justice League. For me, at least, Justice League was probably the biggest show I watched constantly, and had no idea who the characters were besides like Batman and Superman.
Yeah, it was definitely like I didn't watch that too much. I mainly watched Teen Titans, which was kind of funny because like when I saw commercials for that like on Cartoon Network or whenever it like played on, I was literally like I looked at it. I didn't say like the only characters I knew back then was like Batman and Superman. So like when I saw like Flash, Wonder Woman, like Hawker like getting advertised, I was just like, who are these people? Like I literally just like turned it off. And I completely ignored it until like later, until like around middle school when I found them again like on YouTube or whatever, and ended up loving it.
Yeah. I mean, that's good though, right? Because we have a lot of like comic book, like talking about shows in specific. I think the some that really stood out to me, like I said, we had Justice League, the animated series. We had also, don't forget, we had Batman the animated series. That may have been before our time probably, but there were still reruns of the show going on like Cartoon Network and stuff. So yeah, I used to watch that a lot too.
Yeah, that show came out in like
Yeah.
early '90s. Like
Yeah.
that show was I didn't get to experience as many. I don't think I ever got to experience too many animated TV shows, but like seeing clips on YouTube, like when I was in like middle school, high school, like on stuff like that, I felt like I missed out a lot when I saw
Yeah.
that stuff.
I don't know. What's like some of the shows you guys got to watch as a kid?
Bro, I have so much like so many connections to just old DC shows. Because I started very young with superheroes.
So what shows? What
So,
shows did you watch? If you can
um,
elaborate. Elaborate.
all right. Let's go off by memory. I watched hold on, let me confirm if this is a show, but I watched Crypto the Superdog.
That was a
Yep,
show.
Crypto Superdog was a show. I remember it. It was a pretty good show.
Yes, yes. Yeah, 2005, 2 seasons. Yes. I watched Crypto the Superdog, Legion of Superheroes. Um, what else? Young Justice, Teen Titans. Um, hmm. The old Static Shock, obviously. I'm trying to remember. I just basically any show that had DC as a name, I watched it when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, what was like your favorite though out of all those DC animated shows? Because you did have a lot to pick from back in the day.
Well, when I was younger, when I was like when I was first starting off, I loved anything that included Superman because back then I was a big Superman fan. And so the Legion of Superheroes brought these new characters to me that I never heard of, and a young Superman that was just doing awesome stuff and learning how to be Superman, which to me was something brand new because usually they show him as an adult already ready to fly. And so Legion of Superhero was definitely one of my favorite shows growing up. I was kind of mad that it got canceled.
Hmm.
Another one of my favorite was Teen Titans because Beast Boy was my favorite character since I could relate to just that whole funny humor and always being the goofy guy and never the smartest. So to me, Teen Titans and Legion of Superheroes just had a very close connection to who I was when I was younger.
I'm gonna jump on that Teen Titans bandwagon, and I just want to say, I think the most impactful part of that show for me specifically was the Red X like arc that they had with Robin and what do they and Deathstroke. That was like the most I've ever stayed glued to a TV as a kid. I was so like enthralled of what was gonna happen with the team with Robin, and it's like one of the first times I actually really paid attention to a story before like after the episode was over ever in my life. And it was sort of like kind of like groundbreaking. I'm like, wow, they can continue a story. It doesn't end the same time it begins in an episode, and I was just like, wow, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah, the sad part is kids nowadays will never have that feeling since now they're focusing more on enjoyment and just like teaching stuff rather than giving a good story and teaching a kid what mysteries are between like within a writer's mind and everything that could be
Nah,
created.
there's some shows that really, I think there's some shows that just don't. It's like it's marketed for kids, but there's a lot of like shows that is meant for like I guess a more vast audience. Like Batman the Animated Series, I think is probably the most like yes, it's marketed for kids, but it could be watched and like understood by everyone of every age. Especially there's like I think this
And
episode.
that's what good writing is.
Yeah,
When you write something that everybody could understand and enjoy, that's good writing. Even if it's for kids, it's something that adults could sit and enjoy. Like for example, Pixar movies. When we watch a Pixar movie, there are adult jokes for the adults who watch it with their kids, and then there's kids joke that everybody laughs to. So you know you're doing a good job when you can have adults and kids sitting, staring at a screen, watching what you wrote, what you directed, and what you created.
exactly. Lewis, Nova, what was your like I guess, moments or like shows from like back in the day that you really enjoyed?
So, like most of you guys, I started off with Batman. I started off with the Batman anime series. I watched mostly all of them. I didn't watch in order. I just watched it to watch it. And after that, I used to watch Justice League, watch that like a few episodes. But what really got me fully interested was Spider-Man. At that time, my first experience with Spider-Man was that my parents came home from work and they gave me Spider-Man 2.1, the DVD, so I could watch it while I'm in the car and see in the small TV.
Oh, that's right.
So I'll be
The
watching
the
that.
extended cut.
Yeah, it's the extended
Yeah,
thing, the DVD
I had the
version.
extended cut.
That's crazy.
I had the extended cut, and after that movie, I was like, I love Spider-Man, and I still love Spider-Man. So after that, I literally just go on my TV, be like, Spider-Man, and like have that voice like click the button, Spider-Man, you know. And I just watch whatever show they show me, from the spectacular one to like the anime series one, the Spider-Man and Friends one. I don't know. I watched that in the barber shop. That's how much I loved it. I watched it while I was taking a haircut.
I remember Spider-Man and Friends. Like, it was on, so there's like this old channel. For those of you who don't know, there's this channel called Boomerang. And Boomerang likes to do reruns of very old shows. And one of the old shows that it had, along with like Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, it had Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which I believe it was with, what was the name? Iceman and... God.
With like 2X and the Starfox.
It wasn't
Sunfire.
Sunfire. There we
Sunfire.
go. That show was awesome as a kid because it was just more Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I think there was one part of the show that I remember where I think it's like ripped from a comic, right? Where Flash Thompson, he like takes the suit, he like gets like a costume of Spider-Man and tries to act like him. And then Spider-Man's just like, oh, that's cool. Let me make sure that they think he's the real one. Like shoots a web onto his chest, and when he tries to when Flash is like trying to imitate crawling on a wall, he actually starts climbing. And the more he gets up, the more nervous he gets because he's just like, fuck, I'm not the real one, but how am I doing this? It was great. It's like one of those moments where you feel like Spider-Man is just a bully, and we love it.
We do not condone bullying.
I condone fictional bullying if that's what matters.
Make it
That's just him.
like
That's just him.
write it in a book and you'll be fine. And it doesn't apply to you at all.
I don't know. I feel like stepping away from DC, the only good Marvel shows growing up as a kid, I don't know. You have Superhero Squad. I don't know if you guys remember that. I vaguely remember that as a kid.
I remember most of Superhero Squad mainly because it had Reptile, and as you guys know, he's one of my favorite Marvel superheroes.
Who? Wait, sorry, say it again.
Reptile.
Reptile. Okay.
So, well, technically it's Reptile, but obviously in the show, because everybody spoke English, they called him Reptile. But I remember like having a Hispanic superhero that could turn into dinosaur. He was basically Beast Boy, but nerfed. I still thought it was awesome. Just having a character for Marvel that I could relate to was fantastic. And he was just constantly going to missions that he wasn't prepared for, but he would always just try his best. And then Falcon, that was my first introduction to Falcon as well. Well, it was my first introduction to a lot of characters, but just meeting Falcon and how cool and free he was, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
There's also the Iron Man TV show as well.
Yeah.
Oh, the kid Iron Man.
Yeah,
the one
it
with
was
the-
literally Tony. It was literally Tony
Iron-
Stark, but as a teenager. It was
No,
literally
Armored
that.
yeah,
Adventures.
Iron Man Armored Adventures. I actually like that one. I know a lot of people
I
don't
love
like
that
that.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
when I was younger, I might have a different opinion now.
Oh no, it's such a slow burn now. Like I tried rewatching it. It's only 2 seasons long. I think 2 or 3 seasons. And
Most likely.
it's just it's unimaginably slow. Like they don't get to like the story at all, and Tony just never changes. There's no character arc for him, and that's the problem. But
Yeah, I rewatched
as a
at the
kid,
beginning of
that
grade
shit
school.
was fucking flames. Let me tell you. Like I watched that, and then I remember the Mandarin in the movies, and I got so upset. I'm like, why couldn't he be this? Like, why couldn't he just be a badass robot dude?
Yeah, I remember watching that, and like when you're right. It was such a slow burn. When I watched it for the first time like early middle school, like when I was in sixth grade or something like that. I just binge watched the whole series, and it was just like it was quick. I remember like sitting down in my room and just like watching it while I was playing with Legos and stuff like that. Like it really like it was really great for my childhood. And then like I tried to rewatch it in high school, so like I tried rewatching it again like I think like freshman year of high school, and then I was just like, can I skip this part? Like I did that like every other episode. You just felt like you needed to skip things, and it was
Yeah.
like it's
Besides
like what it
that,
was great.
there is also the
The,
1990s version of Iron Man, like the Iron Man like animated series in the 1990s. That was
yeah,
pretty good. I don't know how long that lasted. I did see a few episodes, but not too
and we
much of
can't
it.
forget about the X-Men TV show
Yeah,
as
we
well.
we also have X-Men 97, I believe, and then we also have Spider-Man in the 90s as well. Dude, 1990s Spider-Man was probably my definitive version of the animated Spider-Man until they released Spectacular Spider-Man. Like, cause that show, it felt like you were taking things out of a comic book. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was weird that
Yeah,
that show I think only had like one season or something, like 2 seasons.
No, it
Sorry, two
does
seasons.
not. It has way more.
Spectacular Spider-Man only has 2 seasons, I believe.
No way.
we're about to search this up right now.
Because I know it switched to the Ultimate Spider-Man like pretty
Like,
like
Spectacular
not far after.
It
Spider-Man
has
has 2
5
seasons.
seasons. What do you mean?
From
I'm on
2008.
Wikipedia.
Which one? The one
Never
from
mind.
2008 or the one early on?
No, I'm talking about the 1990 Spider-Man.
Okay.
Spectacular
Oh.
Spider-Man only had 2 seasons because Sony bought. I think Sony bought the rights to show and TV, or bought the rights to Spider-Man at the time, which means Disney couldn't use it at the moment. I don't know. It was a weird situation with Sony and Disney, and that show is kind of in limbo because like technically Spider-Man is owned by Sony, but the production was made by Disney. It was weird. It's a weird.
Yeah, Disney
world
still
mishap.
had the rights to release the animated version of Spider-Man, but not the live
not
action.
not that specific version.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's funny is that the 1990s Spider-Man actually went and did the Spider-Verse too. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, with like the Spider Iron Man, the Spider armor.
Yeah,
There
Iron
was also
Spider.
the 6 arm Spider Man. There was I remember in the beginning it was just a clone Spider Man.
And yeah, Ben
There
Riley was
was
in there too.
Ben Riley too.
Dude, it was such a crazy thing for me as a kid watching that because I was like, there's 5, 6 Spider-Men, and I was like, dude, this is sick. This is awesome. But the sixth arm Spider-Man kind of creeped me out. I was like, that's not normal. That's not okay. I don't like that.
You know what's crazy?
What?
My
He has
entire
6
childhood
arms.
was basically DC. So I could barely relate to you guys because I didn't connect with Marvel until like a little much more later on.
I think for me specifically, I can't speak for anyone else, but I connected to older media much more than I did to media that was coming out now. Like I loved Tom and Jerry, I loved Looney Tunes growing up cuz I think like we were born in that middle area where like the 90s were just ended and it's like 2 to 3 years into the 2000s. So 90s stuff was still relevant but not as relevant.
No, for me, like for example, I used to watch the 1940s Superman movie, animated movie, on repeat.
1940s Superman movie? Oh my god. Where's that from?
Yeah, my dad had a disc of it, and I remember I used to play it on the DVD. I don't know if it was a VHS or a DVD. I was way too young to know what the fuck I was doing. Like I'm telling you, this is when I was like around 4 to 5 years old, and I remember I would watch it on repeat. I still remember Superman dropping the door and fighting huge robots for some random reason. It's just a reoccurring memory because just watching Superman unlocked a core memory for me, and so ever since then, I've been very exclusive and only been DC. And then my best friend and well, my first best friend ever, he introduced me to Marvel. And I was like, oh shit. So this is where Marvel Squadron comes in and the later shows, but I was already too late to watch the older stuff. Plus, I already had like years of background on DC, so I didn't have time to catch up. I had time. I had to like go ahead with Marvel.
Yeah. I mean, and then stepping out of like things we did as a kid, we also had like Marvel movies growing up. Like we were fortunate enough to be, I guess, around as a kid around the same time the MCU was growing up, you know? And
Yeah, we're like 5, 6 years old when Iron Man came out.
I don't think
When the
Yeah.
original Iron Man came
yeah,
out.
but I remember watching Iron Man I think 2 years after it released on an airplane. The first Iron Man I watched on an airplane and I watched it the whole way through, and after that I was a huge Iron Man fan. I was like, this guy's sick, he's cool, he's handsome, he has money, and he's a superhero. What more could you ask for?
I used to not like. I
Funny
used
thing.
to think he was such a jackass.
Yeah. That seems fair.
Well,
Yeah.
and also my like.
What does
my
that say
first
about
best
me,
friend
Grimm?
used to be-
What does that say?
No, but what we go? No, because my first best friend also loved Iron Man. Like he was such an Iron Man fan, but I was like, this man's just metal and like jackass. Like there's nothing to this dude.
I mean, listen,
But
man. It
as
was
I got older, I started appreciating Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man.
yeah.
Rest in peace.
What do
Yeah, well,
yeah.
in
yeah.
the movies. You
Yes,
mean- really
in the
does.
movies.
He's
Oh
not
my-
dead.
Robert Downey Jr. is not dead. Iron Man is. But
Funny thing is, I didn't start with Iron Man as in the MCU. I started from Avengers. That's the first movie I watched from the
wow.
MCU.
Hey
I
man,
started from the Avengers, and
technically we all started with Spider-Man, because now it's officially MCU.
That's true. I
that's
remember
also true.
That makes
But
that makes
then-
my first
but you
MCU
mean-
movie is Spider-Man 2, actually. Same as
yeah,
Lois.
same thing. Same thing here. But no, not the same as me because I watched the 2.1 version. Haha.
I mean, that's still the same. All right, whatever.
It's the same thing. It was probably just an extra few minutes.
I
It was
remember
probably just an
watching
extra
that
few
movie
minutes.
like on my PSP because it came out with like when the PSP was released, like it was already down. Like if you pre-ordered it, it automatically like downloaded it. So I literally just remember watching like in daycare or like just at home, just holding my PSP watching that movie, and like it's crazy that that's now like like that's considered one of the first MCU movies now because of No Way Home.
Dude, I want to talk about the first time I ever watched a Marvel movie in general, because it wasn't the MCU. It was actually the first Blade movie.
Blade was beautiful.
Dude, Blade is such a fucking badass. And I love that he was my first ever like live action superhero, because it really set the bar for me from like how gory things can get. And I was 5. My dad, he was just like, "Hey son, you wanna sit down and watch some vampire slaying?" And I'm like, "Oh boy." And then, Ryan Reynolds comes in with sounding like what the future will be Deadpool, and just guts and gore everywhere. It really set the expectation of like that's what superhero movies were. And unfortunately,
Well,
Iron Man did not have guts and gore.
For me,
Here's
not
Here's
only
another
was
fight.
it
Blade.
what happened,
Funny thing is, I never watched Blade.
you haven't.
Yeah, you have to go watch
I
it.
still haven't watched it either. I
You
still
guys,
haven't watched
we
it.
need
You
to we
guys
need to do a
have
little
to
watch
watch
party.
it. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, my first movie that was live action of a superhero was Spider-Man, obviously. And I think that was the first time I saw James Franco as my favorite actor before the accusations and stuff. So, like that was because I used to be a big James Franco fan as an actor, and I just thought he was amazing. And what's it called? My second one, which became my most favorite of all time, was Hellboy. Hellboy was my first introduction to sort of like gorish and just pure obscure, not nonsense, but stuff that you wouldn't see anywhere.
Dude, funny enough, I like how I say I watched Blade, but I actually never watched any of the original Hellboy movies.
Bro, you have to. Oh my god, I'm so mad that the new one just was terrible because the old one was so amazing.
I
It
really
just
did like
had
the
a
old
good
one.
What happened?
I really like the old one, even though I was like young and I didn't really understand it at first. And like rewatching it, I just loved it. It just felt like from my
I feel
childhood.
like there's a lot of aspects in like movies and shows that we won't ever get as a kid, but then looking back at it, we feel like, oh, I'm so dumb. I should have really realized what was going on and should have been more into like what the context was, you know. And so I'm just like, Spider-Man, go pew pew, twip twip.
Yeah, he still goes pew pew. We're high
Man,
while we're doing
I'm
this.
just mad they fucked up Hellboy recently.
Bro, I heard about that with like the recent. I was like, what, 2019, 2018 when that movie came out.
Most likely.
Yeah, and like
2019,
people
I
just
believe.
were not happy. They're just like, this is not what I expected Hellboy's return to be, which is unfortunate. You know, it's like sort of a trend that we see with like movies later on with DC specifically, how poor management and not a solid direction will just lead a movie to be other shit.
Yeah. I mean, some movies could have a great sequel, but some other movies just have terrible sequels or terrible reincarnations of the character, and it ruins it because all we're left with is old memories, and we want to recreate that feeling of when we first watched it.
I mean, just look at Ben Affleck's Daredevil. That ruined the character in the eyes of the general public for years because that movie sucks. I think someone said this best. I don't know where I saw this, probably somewhere on YouTube, that after Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out, every other superhero origin story imitated Spider-Man. And of course, since it's Spider-Man, it's not going to be living up to the hype of the actual movie that it's basing itself off of. Like, and that's what they did with Daredevil. That's what we did with the Catwoman movie. Ugh,
Mm-hmm.
that sucked.
There's a lot like even some parodies even try to copy Spider-Man, like the superhero movie. Like
What
man, that was just the superhero movie. Like
what was that?
yeah,
Oh, they call this
there's
superhero.
it's literally a movie like a spoof. It's like literally a full-on hour spoof of imitating Spider-Man. It's so funny. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's hilarious. It's with Kevin Hart. There's a lot of comedy actors in it. It's
Sweet.
plain out funny, and it even shows like they really thought Spider-Man was a big deal during that time.
Well,
So like,
I'm just saying.
they wanted to copy everything.
I'm just saying that like people took the premise of Spider-Man and try to give it to other superheroes and take it seriously. Like the way Daredevil was framed in that movie, it felt like I was watching Spider-Man, but this time Spider-Man had batons. Like, I don't know. It's really
Yeah,
weird.
and it just created a superhero stereotype, like, oh, this is just what superhero films are about, and it's like it just
Yeah.
created that whole stereotype for years and years until like, and it's like in a
Iron
negative way
Man.
too until Iron Man came out, like, and
Yeah.
like Thor kind of like played into like that stereotype, like now now superhero movie makers, like they're all trying to avoid that stereotype while making something unique, but also like try not to branch out too far from that spectrum to be like, oh, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this? Like, I genuinely don't know what this is. Like the Eternals movie, like
I don't want to talk about Eternals. Everyone knows how I feel about Eternals. Eternals fucking blows. It's literally the worst thing I've ever seen.
yeah,
I've
like it
already
created that
said on
stereotype.
Eternals, I don't want to talk about that terrible movie ever again.
And it's I don't want let's not bring it up. But the main thing about like I guess let's talk about what's like your most like the most disturbing scene you've seen in a superhero film.
Disturbing.
Disturbing as in like
Disturbing.
gory
Something
or
that like creeped you out, something that sort of just like if you like you were looking at it in the story, I'm like, oh, that's awful, that's weird, that's kind of like just not okay.
I'm not gonna lie. I think I'm gonna have to go back with Hellboy. I'm trying to go based off memory, but there was a character that I believe he had like I think it was a smoke or sand. It was his ability, but he was like very creepy and disturbing. And I remember as a child, every time the character would appear, I just felt uncomfortable. I just felt like this is not no this is, well, obviously Hellboy isn't normal as as it is, but I'm just saying like it was just weird. And then they were also fighting Nazis, so seeing some of the cruelty that happened there was just like, holy shit, this shouldn't be. I shouldn't be watching this considering that I'm only 3 years old, but fuck it, I'm in love.
Yeah, Jesus. I think for me, I think it was the whole Bully Maguire thing in Spider-Man 3.
That traumatized you?
Not
I wasn't
traumatized me,
like,
but in a way, I was sort of just like creeped out by it. Yeah, I was cool. I was just like, oh, he gets this new suit. He looks awesome. I love the black suit. But I also don't like the way he destroys his life. And it's sort of to me because, like, you put yourself in Spider-Man's shoes. It almost felt like what he was doing, he was destroying my vision of what Spider-Man was. And, like, seeing him go through, like, obviously, like, moments are funny. Things are, like, comedical. But, like, just seeing him, like, do the things with Gwen Stacy, reject Mary Jane, literally push away every good thing about his life, sort of just made me feel really damper about the whole movie. I don't know.
yeah, I found that movie like more. I remember watching that as a kid, and I was just like, I was more confused by it than actually like anything else. I remember like seeing that happen. I was just like, huh? How does that? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I, I
I
think as a
don't
kid,
really have a disturbing. I don't really have a disturbing moment.
I just realized that I said I watched Blade, and that's like probably the goriest movie we're talking about, and nothing from that disturbed me.
I mean, maybe you don't remember it.
Oh, I do.
And
I
nothing
do.
disturbed you? Nothing?
No.
Not even the scene where they're like, I forgot where exactly, but they're in this like building and it's like very open and he just fucking mass
Yeah.
slaughters.
Yeah. No, that was sick.
No, I thought that was
So
sick
are
too,
you?
but you weren't disturbed by that? You were instead disturbed by a bully? Really?
No, I think for me as a kid, I was like a very emotionally driven, right? So like seeing people just being the person that they are is fucking awesome to me, no matter how gory it is. Like, yeah, maybe I was like a little scared. I was just like, oh, that's blood. There's guts. But like, I was never irked the same way I was when like Peter was just going through that change in Spider-Man 3. Like, Blade is Blade, man. You already like I watched all the movies from Blade, so I kind of had an expectation what was gonna happen. They kind of set it up for you, but with Spider-Man, you don't expect that from Spider-Man. Come on, I was a kid, man. Don't judge me.
I found I found who disturbed me. I searched up the Hellboy movies. His name is Carl Ruprecht Cronin, and he had this mask. Holy
You want to
shit! Every
send
time
a
he
photo?
appeared,
I wanna know what you're talking about.
I got you. But every time he appeared, man, you know he meant business, and shit went down because he was just that character that was supposed like purposely made to inflict fear. I don't know for adults how that went. Obviously, they're adults, but for me as a child, seeing him, oh my fucking god! Even the Sandman wasn't even as bad as this dude.
Oh my god, what is this?
He's one of the leaders for the Nazi
Oh my
members
god.
that were in Hellboy, and he has like blades on his wrist,
Yeah, as a kid, that's like pure nightmare fuel.
bro.
Like
This man,
Venom to me, I think for Lewis mentioned in our last podcast, we should definitely watch. Lewis mentioned that Venom from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, was nightmare fuel for him, which I can reciprocate. That's kind of terrifying.
yes.
Yes.
yeah, I don't know what the fuck I was doing watching this movie as a kid.
Yeah, this is like not okay. But it's like looking back at it now, he sort of just looks like an NPC I would see in Fallout, and that's probably it.
Yeah, but like when you see, because even in the actual movie, he had that vibe that was just terrible. Because that's how he is in the comics. He's a very gruesome, terrible man. So watching the movies with the sounds, with the how they represented him, how they mentioned him, how he appeared, everything was extremely fearful. He was a man of power. People were supposed to tremor at him. So if adults were supposed to feel some sort of fear, imagine a fucking 3-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, especially like looking back at, like, because obviously I know there's like, it's proven that you see the world differently as a kid because like your senses are like in a different state until like you grow up. But like, I think, when did you guys ever become actually aware of like the plot of movies? Like, so you'll get the general plot, like Spider-Man gets his powers, stops a bad guy. But when do you start, like, when did you guys start learning or wanting to learn about the nuances of like comic book movies and shows?
Definition, please. That's too much big words.
What
Um,
what do you mean?
I'll
Sorry.
answer and we'll see if like this clears things up. But for me, I think it was probably around Age of Ultron. I think that's when I started thinking more about like movie plot and stuff like that. Like, we were at around that age where, when that came out, you start thinking about like, okay, so what is the story here? Like after you watch it, you're kind of like, oh, so wait, Ultron is trying to take over the world. He's created by Tony Stark, but like why are things happening the way they're happening? Like, is this really like why is it sort of this way? It just doesn't, like, are these things realistic or not? Like you start to question like why things are what they are in the movie, and I think that's the first time for me that I started to understand what was really going on in terms of story for comic book movies, because we were just at about that age. I think it was like 2015. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
For
around
me, to
that
continue
time.
on the
Oh, you go for it, Lewis. Shoot.
no, you can
No, no,
finish.
shoot.
Uh, to continue on the MCU theme, for me, it would be Iron Man 3. I think that's the best story arc for Tony Stark. He was able to learn how to be a man without the suit, and that's the best way to interpret it in every film after that, like Age of Ultron, which I think wasn't that great. So me at that age, showing that we actually need a story arc towards the film, and that's a good thing that every film after that, like what was it, Thor Ragnarok, finally gave him a story arc, and it's just being a simple, boring Thor, give him a community factor, and that took place throughout the movies. If we actually look at that, and that gave us more characterization towards the films and of liking it more.
Yeah, I definitely say like Iron Man 3 was like story for Tony Stark. It's funny how you mentioned like mainly like the end of trilogies in terms of story,
Mm-hmm.
because it feels like a completion, but as we know, like because of the MCU, like Tony Stark's story didn't end with Iron Man 3, even though he threw
Yeah,
away his arc reactor. Like even though he was
yeah,
technically set free, it meant a lot to him.
and most of these characters have their like building up arc throughout their series, not in the series, but throughout the MCU. Like Thor, like I said, his comedy factor built up throughout the MCU. The beginning, he was all serious. Avengers, he was had a little jokes, and he continued to have those jokes, and it just fit perfectly at the timeline when Ragnarok came out. Tony tried to be a father figure throughout. He would put his own body for people, and throughout it, like the first half of it was him just being putting his own body at risk and being able to handle the sacrifice he could make. And when Spider-Man basically came along, he had to manage that plus being a father figure or towards that,
Towards what?
towards Peter. He was basically the surrogate father that Peter didn't have, and that was his arc.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, of
and
course,
that's
yeah.
Yeah,
For
we were
me,
definitely at that age. Go ahead, Grim. Sorry.
um, for me, the movie that like snapped that there's a storyline. It was pretty early compared to you guys. It was a Dark Knight. Because like I said, I had already grown up. Whoa, sorry, I had already grown up watching stuff that wasn't meant for my age. So by the time that The Dark Knight came out, I sort of had an understanding of what the plot is, what the subplot is, what characters' intentions are. And I remember watching The Dark Knight And this was before I knew any better. But I actually liked Bane. Of course, now because I know that Bane is supposed to be Hispanic, he's supposed to represent his luchador origin as it's part of who he is. Now it's a whole different outlook on Bane. But when I was younger, just seeing a villain that could actually make people fear for their lives, and the Joker being able to question what morality is, I already had sort of a not a deeper understanding, but a better understanding than anybody my age, because I was already in love with those sort of stories.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Like, I think for me, my first ever story that like I actually was like, all right, what is going on here? Is probably First Avenger, Captain America. Because I think when it happened, because at the end of the movie, you know, like Red Skull gets like blasted, like beamed up to. At that point, we didn't know where he was going. We thought he was just gone for good. Um, and I was sort of just like, what happens here? Like, what goes on? And then I start to just follow the story a bit more. And, you know, as a kid, YouTube was becoming more popular. So then you start following these, like, theory videos on, like, what the Tesseract was. Is it, like, one of these things called an Infinity Stone? And that was my bigger and broader introduction to to Marvel Comics as a whole rather than just the movies.
Yeah, I definitely came in as like I guess I was really introduced to movies late too. Like compared to all of you guys, I think like I guess it was just how I was like how my parents like monitored me, but like I didn't get into Marvel movies until like really into it till like middle school, late middle school, and then like it really didn't become a passion until like until me and Gabe when we were in the same history class, like, we started talking about it like all the time, and
Yep.
I remember like those conversations being more in depth about like these characters and what it means for the future of Marvel and for the future of DC, and it brought me back to thinking about like all of these things that I've seen in my childhood, but I never really centered like my enjoyment off of it, but it was just kind of there, and like having you around at that time, like it allowed me to think. Lewis was there too, around eighth grade. Like
Hmm.
it was really good for me personally that like I had you guys around because I don't think that I would have loved Marvel or DC as much as I do currently if it weren't for you guys at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot. It was contributing it to us is kind of an understatement because I remember you just being so deep into it. Like you just fell in love with whatever was going on with like the MCU and comic books, and you would tell me like, "Oh yeah, this is happening in the comics, so this is probably gonna happen in the next movie," and I was like, "That's so cool."
Yeah, we definitely had like a lot of playback with each other, like thinking what's gonna happen next. We had so much fun like around middle school. Like that's when we full on. I think that's when we finally had like open conversations about the MCU, what we loved about it, like everything related to comic books, like originated for us in conversation when we got to middle school.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
mean, most of you guys don't know, but Ralph was like a schemer back in the day. Well, I say back in the day like we're old,
Dang.
but Ralph used to like theorize a bunch of things about, you know, stuff he was interested in. When we were kids, we were heavily into Pokemon. We loved Pokemon the game, like the games. So we had theories about like Darkrai and all these like Diamond and Pearl theories we had back in the day. And he would scare the crap out of me with like these quote unquote legends he saw that were 100% for real about like shadow Pokemon that would like try and kill you. So yeah, thank you, Ralph, for giving me nightmare fuel. Like you should. I remember it because like Ralph is like just picture like just like a short little Asian boy just tell you like, yeah, they're gonna come into your sleep, they're gonna fucking murder you. And I was just like, no, they're not. And they're like,
like
he's like,
like
yes, they
8 years
are.
old too. I like 8 years old too.
He's like, you don't believe me? Look at the shadows. I was just like, oh
And
my
like
god.
it was funny because like I remember like telling you that in cafeteria, and then like there was a as soon as I said that there's a blackout in the
Dude,
cafeteria, so we
that
got
scared
like
the
put to the
shit out
corner.
of me. I was like, you were just like, oh, you don't believe me? And then I think like a couple minutes after he said that, doom, the power goes out. I'm like ready to shit my pants as a kid. I was just like, I'm not prepared for this, bro. The Shadow Pokemon could have come and just fucked me up.
I remember looking at you like, yeah, I told you so.
Yo, you were enjoying it. You were sadistic. You were just like, yeah. Thought you didn't believe me now, did you? Fucking.
I think it's funny that just Raph and I had so much in common, but it took so long for us to meet because, again, I wasn't in this country for most of my childhood. So it was like, by the time I met you guys, I had already a deep understanding of comic books and movies and shows. So when I met Raph, it was an instant click. It's like, oh, you like this character? I fucking love this story arc. And he'll go like, oh, I like this. And we just spend hours just talking about them.
Yeah, our first meeting was actually like through comic books, technically speaking, because we met playing Injustice 2 and
Yeah, yeah,
So,
because I
like-
was meeting Flash, which, all right, you
No,
asked me
Flash,
this
Flash
question,
is Flash is
dude.
goated. Flash is goated.
You asked me this question. What is the first comic book I ever read before we did the podcast now? And I figured it out finally. My first ever comic was a Flash comic.
Do
You
which
remember
one?
what issue?
I do not remember what issue or what arc it has to deal with. I think it had to deal with Vertigo, Count Vertigo. Because I remember there being like a person that was making the Flash unable to fight, and I don't have it. I don't think I do, but I just remember it,
Yeah.
which is crazy. I fucking and it's funny because Flash and Superman were like my biggest characters when I was younger, especially since with Young Justice they introduced Kid Flash and I fell in love with them. But now that I'm older, they're not even close to the people I love.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, let's jump into stuff that's like sort of happening now or just happened. I think from where superhero content like media wise evolved from is like just completely different today. Like you can have movies like Daredevil in the early 2000s, but now you have a show that does way more for the character than a single movie ever did. You have things for like X-Men is coming, hopefully. But you have things like for Wanda, you have things for Shang-Chi, a character that I'm pretty sure no one would have expected to be in a movie.
Even though it was always planned, it's like, even though it was planned, according to Kevin Feige, it was planned like a long time ago. It's still like, we are in an era now that it's kind of hard to predict exactly what will come next and how things come together. It's just really great for us growing up kind of. It was, I think it was kind of easier as kids to predict from what happened in the comics to say what happens in the movies, like what would happen. But now that but even as we're older, and we still try to theorize and like from comic book knowledge to what's going to happen in the movies, like we're still struggle, like we still struggle with like WandaVision, Festo, like we still struggle to figure out what comes next. And I think that's a beautiful thing for us as comic book watchers and people who've grown up watching this stuff.
I think like what is your guys? This is gonna be my final question. What is your favorite recent superhero project that has come out in the last 5 years?
Last 5 years.
There's a lot of great stuff in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
What are
And
just
the
some
la-
of them? It doesn't have to be your definitive. What has come out like superhero wise in the last 5 years that you guys enjoyed?
It's kind of biased for me, but like I personally love Shang-Chi. Like it to me as like in terms of storyline for me, I felt most related to that as an Asian American. Like I cannot express how like related I felt to Shang-Chi. Like him, even though him being born and raised in Asia, but like come to the States, and like Katie's character in that movie, like being growing up in America, like and her having a degree, but also having like pressure from her family. It's like family, like as an immigrant, like it's such a beautiful story. And Shang-Chi's parents, like him dealing with the fact of where he came from, but also what's his future, like him coming to terms with that. Like I felt so much from watching that movie. And in terms of action, he has some arguably he has one of the best action like hand-to-hand combat sequences like in all of the MCU. Like the action has just been incredible.
I think it's arguably the best action in any superhero film.
Like it's definitely like for me absolutely number one solo movie. Like for me, I think that was incredible. I think Shang-Chi's story like was on top of everything else, and I absolutely loved it.
You know what? I'm gonna have to completely agree with you because I remember talking to you how excited I was before it came out, and then how we both were just super excited after it came out. I think you and I were the only two people anticipating the project in that entire like
It was
time
so
period that
underhyped. It was
announced.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like like you and I found out it was coming out, and you and I just got super hyped, and everybody's confused, like, who the fuck is this character? And you and I were like, oh my god, finally an Asian superhero, and it's Shang-Chi. It's gonna be fucking fantastic. And I remember after it came out, I even did a project for college on Shang-Chi, and it was fantastic. I was just super hyped to tell everybody about it. And honestly, arguably for me, it's one of the best MCU solo movies. Not the best, but it's one of them.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you guys. Shang-Chi is probably like up there in my top 10, maybe top 5 movies, Marvel movies of all time. It's just massive what they do for that character. And I wish every new superhero got that treatment. Unfortunately, they don't, which is sad. Um but I think for me, the one that really stuck home to me was I think came out last year, Suicide Squad. James Gunn's Suicide Squad is to me probably one of the most important things in the right direction to revitalize DC. I know we mentioned in our Peacemaker review that Peacemaker is another good step towards it, but this is like this is like
This
starting
is
line.
what created Peacemaker. So this is the basis for what DC truly needs.
Yeah,
And I do
this
agree with you. But I also noticed none of us have mentioned No Way Home, even though you cried in it. Raph was going
I
crazy.
think
I
No
lost
Way
my
Home
voice.
is such a fucking simple answer to give, and I'm trying to really just be like, nah, man, like, because No Way Home is not a movie; it's an event. It's a cultural event to me.
You know, I think because all right, this is gonna be super controversial, right? Story wise, No Way Home was not the best, but the fact that it delivered for the fans, which is what the fans have been asking for in so many ways for so many years, it created that thing where it sacrificed the story in order to give what the fans want. And I think because it delivered on what the fans wanted, it was such a perfect movie.
Yeah. I gotta say, for me, I feel like I can't really mention that because, like I said, I think everyone here agrees that No Way Home is probably the biggest event of the last,
Besides Endgame.
besides Endgame. Well, I think
Or Infinity War. Infinity War had so much hype.
I think a lot of people regard this to be way more impactful than they love it more than Endgame. Infinity War is different. I think Infinity War is probably the best MCU movie ever.
Yeah.
But
In terms of story, I can agree.
yeah, but
Yeah, like
this
the
No Way
story was
Home, it just does everything so right and for the fans. And I think story wise, I think there is a story to be told. It's Peter going back to basics and going to be what we expect Spider-Man to be in a comic book perspective. He's supposed to be this kid who is struggling every step of the way. And it's good to see him in a spot, well, not good, but it's fun to see him in a spot that's like where you would expect him to be from like what you grew up in the TV shows and the things that we grew up as a kid. Spider-Man was never assisted by a multi-billion-dollar company. He was just a kid in his tights. And so I think it was a good like factory reset for the character. Lewis, do you have anything you wanna add?
Well, you guys basically said my answer was going to be No Way Home. Home. That was the best thing that ever happened the last 5 years. And that brought from my childhood all the way to high school, all the way to now. And it's the best. It's the best thing. Bring two characters that was not in the MCU to bring it into the MCU was fantastic because that's what they deserved from their own trilogy and duology. But like
Yeah.
I say, it's also somewhat of an event, and didn't really have a story. But like I keep mentioning in previous podcasts that the Spider-Man story was always there. It was always within the trilogy, and that's what I mentioned from the beginning of the podcast. It's throughout the series. It's always been throughout the series for the MCU.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's something that I think it's so hard not to like when a good Spider-Man movie comes out. Or a decent one, even. Because it's Spider-Man. Everyone can relate to this person in some way or another. Whether it's Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Miguel O'Hara, whoever you relate to in the little Spider-Verse, there is a character for you. And yeah, I think that kind of sums up. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention the X-Men movies. Sorry. But the only really good X-Men movie, in my opinion, is Logan. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless you guys, you guys have anything to say about Logan in specific?
It was
I don't know.
I'm not gonna. I haven't finished it.
I watched that movie all the way through, and
Yeah.
it was like probably the most gut-wrenching X-Men movie they have out there. It's the best X-Men movie they have out there. But yeah, I don't know.
I wouldn't consider it an X-Men film.
But it is an X-Men
see
film.
it.
It's considered it.
No, but it's that good that you have to take it out.
I mean, but, sure.
It's that good that you have to take it. You can't.
Disney,
put Logan
make better
with the
X-Men films. You have the property now. Fucking do it, pussy.
Well,
And-
I think with the X-Men films, like they're probably not even put Wolverine in. I think it's going to go a while from putting Wolverine.
The Wolverine was
only-
good. I enjoy it. I think the ending kind of caught me off guard because it literally just looks like Obadiah Stane got adamantium. But yeah, boys, I think that's our time now. I think it's time for us to skedaddle and do our own thing. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification to notify you every time we make a new video. And don't forget to click on our other videos and our other podcasts to see what else we're talking about. Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate the support that's been shown on our channel. We recently hit, I think it was 50 subscribers, so that's pretty sick.
60
You guys-
now.
60?
60. We're 60 now.
We just hit it right now?
Oh, we just said it right
Yeah.
now. We just
Well,
said it right now.
thank you for 60 subscribers. It is sick, the progression that we're getting. Like we always say, it's slow, but it's worth it seeing you guys enjoying it. And again, make sure you guys go in the comments, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, so that we can keep improving this content further so that you guys can enjoy. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. Peace out.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, people.